Previously on Lightspeed Rescue.
If you want to destroy a city, you do it from the ground up.
Faster! I'll destroy Mariner Bay with an earthquake. Well, well, if it isn't the Power Rangers. I am Vibra. I'm glad we finally met, so I can destroy you. Just what I thought. In my Vipari, I'm invincible. I will, Diabolico. Once it's recharged, I'll lay waste to Mariner Bay. So our Queen Banshura will rise. Again.
What the hell is that?
And now, cardigans. Alright, we're back. Part 2 of my reactions to History of Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. I wanted to wear a red thermal for this because it would look similar to what Carter Grayson wears, but my red thermal shirt is in the wash right now, so it's just all gray for right now. Oh well. Doesn't matter. Let's just jump right in.
But enough about the main plot. This is supposed to take place in the main universe, right? So, how are things over on Miranoi? Well, at 29 episodes into the season, we cut to across the universe on the New World, where we see Leo take his Quasar Saber out of the rock and morph. An evil force he was fighting mysteriously teleports away and travels through a wormhole to Earth. Yup, it's time for the season's team-up. On Earth, the evil forces Leo was fighting take people prisoner in an office building to extract their life force for a woman in shadows. The daughter of two of the kidnapped people tries to warn people of what she saw.
Now you know, dear, there's no such thing as monsters.
You live in a city that is constantly under attack by monsters, and the Power Rangers are known public figures without secret identities. Not to mention the fact that Earth was invaded and almost conquered a few years ago by monsters. Lady, I officially declare you dumbest person in Power Rangers ever. Olympius believes that the monsters are doing it for Banshira, but when he leaves, the woman emerges from the shadows.
I always hated that lady. Although it's funny, when I was rewatching all the episodes of Lightspeed Rescue in preparation for these, I had this thought where it's like, what if that lady, that receptionist lady, like watches whatever is like the Fox News equivalents in like the Power Rangers universe? If there's like a Fox News like channel in the Power Rangers universe that like constantly denies all the giant monster attacks and stuff like that, and saying it's all fake news, like that sort of thing. I mean, you can make that argument. You can say, oh, maybe she just moved there or whatever. Either way, it's still a really dumb line, a really, really stupid line. Oh my god. Anyway, back to this.
Trina, wearing a mask that covers up burnt sections of her face. We'll talk more about that later. Carter comes across the little girl who tells him about the attack as well as a monster disguised as a man.
You don't believe me, do you?
Actually, I do.
Carter Grayson, not an idiot. Leo somehow makes it to Earth and meets up with the other Rangers.
Hey, you're Leo. The Red Ranger.
How the hell does she know that? Even if the colonists were able to get back in touch with Earth, the Rangers' identities weren't publicly known in Lost Galaxy. Carter's trailing of the disguised monster is interrupted by the ghouls, the foot soldiers of the monster helping Trina. However, Kai and Maya arrive to help him. Back at the Aquabase, Leo explains the final battle he had with Trina before the two teams go off to face a disturbance. And of course, bring the little girl with them. Professional life-saving individuals, everybody. The monsters knock them around for a bit before just leaving for no reason, and Carter hatches a plan with the little girl, telling her to go in and pull the fire alarm on the building. Why don't the Rangers just pull rank on the building and tell them to evacuate it to get them out? Or rather, why the hell are they sending the little girl in to pull the fire alarm when Carter could just do it himself? Leo and Carter destroy the monster and...
Also, it's like, Carter's a firefighter. He could have just gone in there himself and said, hey, listen, we need to test out a new fire drill, so if you could tell all the building managers to get everyone to evacuate the building and so we can set up the drill, we would really appreciate that. But yeah, like, that would have made more sense. But whatever, I don't know. I'm trying to make this a little more cohesive. Is it working? Probably not.
Head in alone for some reason, but are aided by Kendricks and Damon, who suddenly show up. Yep. The rest of the Rangers join in and they morph, using Sentai footage of them turning the dial, as I said last time, not a thing in Lost Galaxy. But the bigger continuity issue there is that Damon has suddenly stopped being black for this shot. Olympius and his forces show up while Trina starts to transfer the life force energy into her, mutating her back into her insect form. However, Olympius infects her form with a poison that mutates her into a giant insect monster. The two teams summon their Zords and fight Trina, the Galaxy Rangers even entering the Omega Megazord and enhancing it with the lights of Orion.
That was cool.
And soon they have destroyed Trina yet again.
Visually.
Pretty sure for good this time. The Galaxy Rangers depart on their jet jammers with no explanation ever given how the hell they made it back to Earth. Well, people claim it was that wormhole we saw in the beginning, but where that came from and how the Rangers learned how to access it is another matter altogether. Then again, Miranoi seems to just have a bunch of wormholes and portals hanging around it like we saw last season. I guess they just found one and guessed that it probably led to Earth. Trina's revenge is a huge disappointment, for me especially, since I had been looking forward to it all season. It's not that it's bad, but it's underwhelming, especially for a two-parter that brings back the big bad from last season and lets us see last season's team again. The Galaxy Rangers are barely in it, and we spend far too much time with Carter and the little girl bonding. And she's fine. She's not a bad actress, and if this were a regular story, I'd have no objection to it as a cute little filler episode. But it's not, and she is not what we are here for, which is why I haven't bothered giving you guys her name. It kind of feels like they took an existing script and then stapled on the team-up stuff as an afterthought. This is also a weird case because Trina's Revenge was released months ahead of the airing on TV as a special VHS tape from Select McDonald's. It's made even weirder because it wasn't even released as Trina's Revenge, uniting two teams of Power Rangers, but rather as Power Rangers in 3D. I have no idea if it was even in 3D or why it would be called that, since it's not like there's a lot of shots in here that feel like they're catering to a 3D gimmick or anything. Hell, how would that even work with the Sentai footage, which was assuredly not shot in 3D? And there was some behind-the-scenes tumult with it, since apparently...
I just to piggyback off of what Lewis was talking about, I had that VHS tape when I was a kid. That was like one of the first Power Ranger things I ever saw. But yeah, I had that. I had all the Happy Meal, Lightspeed Rescue toys. I think I might have mentioned this already in part 1. I forget. But I still have them. I still have those toys in a bin somewhere down in the basement. I do understand what Lewis where he's coming from with these complaints, and having revisited that two-parter in the rewatch for this, yeah, it definitely doesn't hold up as well as I thought it did. But there are aspects of it that I do still like, which I'll get into in just a moment, once Lewis is done talking about this.
Apparently, Danny Slavin, who played Leo, had a pay dispute, and he walked off the set after they completed first unit filming. So, in stuff like ADR and a few pickup shots, he was played by someone else. I have heard that Amy Miller, Trina's original actress, was apparently pretty pissed off that a little girl was going to get more screen time than her, and, like Danny Slavin, was having pay issues, and didn't even end up showing up to filming. Hence why another actress played her in the episodes, and they just covered her mouth to hide it. It's not a team-up completely without merit, and it's still fun to see the two teams together. Even seeing them all in the cockpit for a Megazord is pretty damn unique. But you just end up wishing you were watching To the 10th Power again instead. Back to the main story, Ryan Loke...
I definitely get that. Also, from what I remember reading that the reason for why there was footage of the Lost Galaxy Rangers in the same Megazord cockpit as the Lightspeed Rangers is because that Sentai footage was not for any of the shows that these were based on. Ginga Man and Go-Go 5. It was actually from a team-up movie. I haven't seen the movie where all that came from. In fact, I don't know if it's viewable anywhere in America. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, I that it's like the action I do think helps with this. I think that's one of the big aspects of Trina's Revenge that I still like, as well as in the big morphing sequence with the two teams in part 2. There's a really great moment where it starts out with the Lost Galaxy Rangers, and you hear their theme playing as they all morph. And then once they're done, it goes right into Lightspeed Rescue with their team, their morph, and then their theme playing over that. And like the transition is like pretty like smooth and seamless. Like there, it's, you know, I'm just gonna play it for you. Here, hear it for yourself.
Galaxy Pink!
Lightspeed Rescue!
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. That's like my favorite part of Trina's Revenge. But again, I still understand Lewis's grievances with that two-parter. It doesn't hold up as well as I remember it did, but you know, that tends to happen. I still enjoy it, but at this point I enjoy it more as like a guilty pleasure than anything else. But anyway, let's keep going.
Kate's the Sorcerer of the Sands, which turns out to be a bird, to translate the glyphs. He initiates the spell to reseal the demons, but Diabolico counters it, reducing the sorcerer to dust. In the same episode, Olympius is sent to a shadow dimension and sealed there by Diabolico. But it turns out his mother doesn't care since he's failed so often. Man, Banshira is not only a terrible boss, but a negligent parent too. Yeah. Jinxer remains loyal to the prince, however, and instructs him to absorb the other monsters in the realm, mutating him and enhancing his power. After he escapes, a spell on Captain Mitchell causes him to transfer the Aquabase's power into Olympius. They eventually manage to destroy his power source, the star power, which he had gotten from Diabolico originally, and he's severely weakened by the incident. We actually get 3 proper battleizers this season in the form of the Mega Battlers. One for Chad, one for Joel, and one for Carter. None for Dana or Kelsey because, you know, they're girls and stuff. Carter's is actually a motorcycle that converts into his armored form. They don't look overly silly like previous ones, possibly because they're mostly just big guns. Though I really have to question the skis on Carter's. Seriously, unless they're just armored greaves, adding feet to the battleizer always looks silly. And no, the feet on Lost Galaxies don't act as stabilizers for the big gun, they're just big shoes. Blowback from the weapon would just make his legs bend while his feet stayed in place. In the final few episodes, Queen Banshira's transformation back to normal starts to take hold. Because of her many failures, Vipra is absorbed by her as the last bit of energy she needs.
Now he emotes.
Lokai goes to Banshira for the chance to destroy the Rangers, but before he does, he gives Diabolico a new power source.
Choice.
Thank you, Lokai. Be careful, old friend.
Wait, why are they only now making these two buddy buds? Banshira tricks 4 of the Rangers into the dimension where the demon's lair is and forces Diabolico to shoot at them while Lokai is in the path, destroying him. Diabolico swears off his allegiance to Banshira. And this, kids, is why the best time to unionize is before your boss lets your friend get killed. Banshira uses Diabolico's energy to attack the Rangers, Carter arriving to come save them. Diabolico tells him where to strike Banshira and he runs off to attack her. Carter goes right in with his best I'm a man punch and hits Banshira. The blast sends the Rangers out of the dimension, but Banshira follows and grows. The Rangers force her into retreat and Diabolico swears revenge for Lokai. However, Olympius intercepts him and the two battle, Olympius managing to overpower him and bring him to Banshira, who drains his power and makes him a mindless slave. but only briefly, as the Rangers get him to remember what Banshira did to him and the others. Olympius takes control of Diabolico again, but not before handing Carter a key that the Sorcerer of the Sands had said would help re-imprison the demons. In the ensuing battle, the Megazords are severely damaged. Carter, just to show how badass he is, charges right at the giant Diabolico and shoots at him.
Come on, you bastards! Take a shot at me right in the nose!
At the last second, Dana and Kelsey come to the rescue in the Life Force Megazord, which takes energy directly from the Rangers. Seems kinda dangerous and silly, but hey, it does the trick, utterly destroying Diabolico and Olympius. The Life Force Megazord is premiering here because we need to sell some toys before the season ends in 2 episodes. Although ironically, America not getting that toy. The key becomes a glyph, and Jinxer reveals to Banshira that he placed a battling card on the leg of the Megazord, meaning that the Rangers will be bringing batlings into the Aqua Base. The season comes to a close in The Fate of Lightspeed. Ryan contacts the team and learns Banshira's plan to resurrect all of the fallen monsters from the Shadow Realm or whatever. However, Banshira intercepts the transmission and takes Ryan before he can elaborate. While Carter heads to the other dimension to rescue Ryan, Jinxer activates the battling card, releasing hundreds of them into the Aqua Base. The Rangers quickly get to work fighting them off as the workers flee, though we quickly see that the Aqua Base's defense personnel are pretty pitiful, just running around with riot shields. To make matters worse, the batlings commandeer the Life Force Megazord and bring it out of the base, having it openly attack the structure. Captain Mitchell goes into shock and Fairweather takes command, ordering the crew of the Aqua Base to evacuate. Mitchell remains on the command deck as the place falls apart around him.
Everything I've worked so hard for, it's gone.
So I guess I'm just gonna stop working hard at all and just stand here. They convince him to leave, but the Megazord attacks the connecting tube, cutting off their only way to escape. To make matters worse, the glass in operation starts to crack. Carter, in the meantime, frees Ryan. The two morph and start fighting however they can, though of course it's a matter of them being simply outnumbered. Jinxer and the Batlings take the disabled Omega Megazord to complete the Queen's plan, involving giant stones placed in a specific way. Banshira expels the two Rangers as water starts seeping into the Aqua Base, ending Part 1. Part 2 begins with the Rangers pretty consigned to their fate, but as they view the damage the Omega Megazord is causing on the city,
Guys, we got work to do.
They locate a flooded maintenance shaft that leads to the submarine bay, and Chad swims for it to see if he can reach it. Banshira brings her temple to the city as Chad returns, saying they can reach the sub bay. They make it out just as the bridge finishes collapsing. They get there, but the Batlings intercept and stop their descent. However, Joel fires the sub's torpedoes, bringing water in around them for their escape. They shoot torpedoes again to knock the Life Force Megazord out of the way. It explodes, taking the Aqua Base with it. Carter and Ryan take out the Omega Megazord, but it drops the last stone into place. The rest of the Rangers arrive and morph as the final phases of Banshira's ceremony begin. The Rangers confront the Queen.
Nothing can stop me now! Nothing except us!
The team fights as best as they can, but Banshira completes the ceremony, Carter's helmet getting knocked off. He kicks Banshira into the crypt where the monsters will come out and gives Ryan the thumbs up, but in a nice twist on what happened in Lost Galaxy, Banshira grabs Carter and drags him down with her. He tells them to close the lid, but the spirit of Diabolico arrives and breaks Banshira's hold, allowing the Rangers to rescue Carter. They seal the lid, trapping Banshira in the Shadow Dimension. The temple collapses, and Mariner Bay, and consequently the world, is saved. With the job complete, the Rangers hand in their morphers, and Joel even gets to have his date with Fairweather that he's been trying to get all season. However, as they spot a fire truck speeding by,
Hey! You forgot these!
Lightspeed Rescue is very much a back-to-basics Ranger series and feels very reminiscent of the very first season. Thematically, it's an overt magic versus technology theme with the Rangers' powers all completely developed by human hands, and we even have the scientists who designed their weapons working with them. Their enemies were demons who were summoned by magic and frequently used magic spells and curses to further their designs. Another thing that felt reminiscent of the first season was the Titanium Ranger, first introduced as a villain, and his story had shades of the original Green Ranger saga. And I don't mean any of this in a bad way. It felt very nostalgic in that sense and quite enjoyable. Speaking of the Titanium Ranger, he's the first Power Ranger ever to be a completely American invention. The Sentai that Lightspeed was based on didn't have a 6th Ranger, nor did it have a character like the Phantom Ranger that they could fill the 6th Ranger slot with, so they made up the Titanium Ranger stuff. The first American exclusive Ranger without any Sentai source footage whatsoever. It's a pretty good job too. Sure, it meant they couldn't do as much with him because it required less Sentai footage, but he looked awesome and showed that American created Rangers can work. The season is mixed for me. There's a lot to like here. The Aqua Base and its staff were a very different sort of command center, and the new weapons being churned out on a regular basis felt very natural for a military operation to be doing. The rescue material wasn't quite as exciting as fighting monsters, but it really highlighted their status as superheroes. The Zords were made of solid metal awesome, and the characters themselves really grew on me. I'd say the season's biggest flaw, and what drags it down, is its villains. I'm sorry, but the demons only got interesting at the very end when Diabolico turned on Banshira and exhibited camaraderie with Lokai, something that was never apparent in the 30-plus episodes before it. Vipera was terrible and always looked silly driving around in her car. The other demons just didn't have any depth to them. Admittedly, the same could be said of Rita in the first season, but at least she scored some victories over the Ranger, and the show was just starting out. They weren't trying to do anything more complex than, this is good guys, this is bad guys. But we've had 2 more seasons now with more complex and interesting villains and motivations, with the villains also managing to be formidable on several occasions. The demons never scored any major victories over the team this season. Their best plot revolved around Ryan, and when he left, a good chunk of interesting things left with him. We also had noble evildoers like Ecliptor and Villamax in recent seasons. Sure, Scorpius was boring as hell, but his death gave Trina renewed life as the main villain of Lost Galaxy. By this point, one should expect something a little more than the demons just at the end remembering to be interesting. The Batlings are really one of the most unimaginative foot soldiers ever. Admittedly, we are back to Sentai foot soldiers instead of original ones for the show that we've had for the last few seasons, but they're so bland. It's guys in black suits with tiny little fake wings and some goggles. At least the putties, while coming from Sentai footage, had the wrinkly, deformed faces to make them look alien and different. Watching the Batlings, I never got the impression they were demons. They just looked like guys in spandex. The point is that Lightspeed's main problem was its enemy, which is a shame because there was certainly potential with them. The Rangers themselves, though, I actually rather liked. Carter is a badass through and through. He's driven by his desire to live up to a firefighter who saved his life as a child, who turns out to have been Captain Mitchell. It's kind of interesting with the redo of this video. Back when I first did it, a common complaint was that Carter was an incredibly bland character, but I brought up in the original video just how frickin' awesome he is, and the attitude seems to have shifted, with most people agreeing with me. Whether that's actually because of people reevaluating because of me, or just fandom shifting in general, I couldn't say. But yeah, the dude's kind of amazing in how fearless he was. He tries to run over a monster. He pulls his gun to stop the enemy. He goes running at a giant monster with just his handguns. He didn't really undergo any development, but he didn't need to. He was just awesome. We can have characters who don't have major arcs as long as you give us something to keep us interested. And with Carter, the man just continually proved how he was a force to be reckoned with. Dana was doing just fine character.
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's funny. I mentioned in part 1, I made a joke in part 1 that when he first appears on screen, like, hey, Steve Rogers. But I've had this thing ever since I started doing my rewatch saying that Carter looks like if Christopher Reeve played Captain America, Steve Rogers, instead of Clark Kent, Superman. Because, like, he does look a lot like Christopher Reeve. Like, in certain moments, he looks a lot like Christopher Reeve. I mean, hell, at the beginning of the video, Lewis himself makes a joke saying that finally we'll be saved by Clark Kent and da-da-da-da. Acknowledging that, yeah, he does look a lot like Christopher Reeve. Which, you know, goes to show this guy would have made for a great Captain America. Or a great Superman. So, yeah. Anyway, back to this.
Character-wise until a bizarre episode near the end called In the Limelight, wherein a fashion mogul out of the blue hires her to be their new model. All of a sudden, she's a big-time celebrity and becomes self-absorbed and completely disregards her ranger duties, despite never in the past indicating that she had those tendencies. It'd be one thing if she was under a spell or something, or if we learned that she never got the chance to have any kind of frivolous, glamorous lifestyle since her father was career military and imparted that onto her. But this is just her suddenly, for no reason at all, abandoning her post as defender of the friggin' city. She walks off during a training exercise, much to the amazement of her fellow rangers.
And you gonna let her leave just like that?
I have to trust her to make her own decisions.
Yeah, I appreciate that kind of sentiment from a father and all, but you are a military operation, and you are her commanding officer. Lives are at stake. If she isn't up to snuff, take away her morpher and give it to someone who actually gives a damn. Yeah, in the story, she eventually realizes that being a ranger is more important and all, but the sudden shift in attitude is just so weird. It'd make more sense maybe if it had happened earlier in the season. Like Carter, there isn't a lot of change in her character, and she's probably the blandest of the group. Chad had the most martial arts background, but it's odd. He was established in the first episode as the SeaWorld guy, and he didn't utilize those skills until near the end of the season. Instead, it's the martial arts background that was the most emphasized. He's not given much of a personality, but we saw him frequently be friendly with Kelsey, which again felt very reminiscent of the close friendship Billy and Trina had back in season 1. Plus, he had a love interest in 2 filler episodes. A mermaid! Not much to say there, but hey, drama is good. Joel had the most personality, and it did improve over time. Namely, from being a self-centered, horny jackass to being someone responsible and noble. In Rising from the Ashes, he expresses genuine concern about Mrs. Fairweather's constant workload. His jerky behavior diminished over time, a subtle expression of it being that in the last few episodes, he pretty much stopped wearing his cowboy hat. Sure, through most of the season, he was determined to bed Dr. Fairweather, but he had a good heart, and in the last episode, when he does score the date with her, he chooses to go with the other Rangers to help people instead. Ryan assisted the Rangers with exposition, having spent most of his life with the forces of evil, and therefore knew some of their plans ahead of time, as well as helping out and trying to stop the demons in a different way. Let's face it, Ryan was the only one among the group who was being proactive. The others were essentially always going to be a rescue squad, responding to danger as it happened, but didn't take any steps to finally put an end to Banshira's forces. Ryan was the one who went out and said, the demons aren't going anywhere, so I'm going to figure out how to put them away for good. Which is definitely a plus, despite not really having much personality after his initial episodes. At first, I wasn't sure why exactly Kelsey would be chosen to become a ranger. She's not exactly a martial arts expert, she's not a public servant, she doesn't have any military training. However, seeing her in The Fifth Crystal showed her evading and fighting off monsters while on rollerblades. She's extraordinarily agile and quick on her feet. Her experiences in sports and fitness actually are well suited for a profession where she has to adapt to quickly changing situations and getting people out of harm's way in a hurry. The downside is that she's impulsive and doesn't look before she leaps. She ends up with the next most development. While she remains very outgoing and energetic throughout the series, an episode where she's almost killed because she failed to take her time made her a little less rash. I did not have a good first impression of Captain Mitchell in the initial few episodes. Instead of explaining anything, he just wagged his finger and assumed that the Rangers are going to learn something when they make a mistake. He never says why they should follow his orders, even though it would take 2 seconds at most to explain them. Carter wants to save some people, but Mitchell orders him to put out a fire. Instead of saying, "Put out the fire, it's heading towards flammable gases," he just keeps repeating the order even while Carter is hesitating. And the hesitation and confusion takes more time than it would take to say that. When a dangerous fuel cell is being transported by the Rangers, he sends Dana to give an old friend of his a ride. He never tells her, "Oh, by the way, the fuel cell that the Rangers are carrying is a diversion. My friend is carrying the real one." He just lets her yell at him for being condescending because she's his daughter, and she almost puts the fuel cell at risk by attempting to come to the aid of the Rangers instead of protecting him. However, those 2 incidents aside, Mitchell did a lot better in future episodes, stepping in when he needed to, but then stepping back when the situation demanded it. I will say that his acting could have been better during The Fate of Lightspeed. We see him shocked and standing at attention as the base collapses around him, but we don't really see that reflected in his face or his body language. He just stands still. When Captain Stanton stood and looked at the destruction wrought upon his command, his sorrow and regret were evident, and he moved on regardless. When Mitchell's command falls apart, he blue screens and stares at an exploding console. The synth music is definitely improved this season and has shades of the series' theme song in it.
If I could, come to the defense of the actor who played Captain Mitchell's performance in the finale with that scene where he's just kind of standing, just kind of staring at everything while everything just kind of goes to shit. If I could defend that, I would say that people sometimes process traumatic events, especially as they're happening, like at that point, a lot differently from others. Some people tend to just kind of completely just shut down, and they don't always like show a ton of emotion or even have a lot of opportunity to just like think things through. They just completely blank out on everything, which tends to happen. That does happen. I've met people who they've said that sort of thing has happened to them. So, I mean, I feel like that's kind of what they were going for with Captain Mitchell with that scene. So, yeah. Hopefully I'm making some level of sense with my ramblings. Hopefully. Also, I'm glad that he said that the music sounds better here than in Lost Galaxy, which I do agree. I love the music for this season. I love the music for this season. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I really wish that they would have the music for these seasons available to stream online, whether through Apple Music or Spotify or just through YouTube, because I've spent many an hour just going through the internet trying to find some pieces of music from these seasons of the show, and I found a couple of tracks from various seasons, but it hasn't been easy. Hasn't been easy, because there's so few things that are out there publicly.
Which is a big help in making it more enjoyable. The lack of a rockin' soundtrack didn't feel as detrimental during this season as it had in Lost Galaxy. An interesting thing to note is that unlike previous seasons, the Rangers are much quicker to pull their blasters, which makes sense. During the Zordon era, we had martial artists through the first 6 seasons. In Lost Galaxy, the Rangers utilized their Quasar sabers for the majority of their combat, but that made sense for them considering they're the source of their powers. In this season, we're not dealing with martial artists. We're dealing with people who were specifically brought in to be combat soldiers. They don't waste time by kicking and punching. They're gonna shoot the damn thing to stop it as quickly as they can, or try to run it over. Lightspeed Rescue was both different and familiar in a lot of ways. The stakes didn't seem as high as they had in previous seasons despite the world-ending threat, but there's a very nice sense of optimism about it, that if you were living in Mariner Bay, you could rest easy knowing that the Power Rangers were watching over you. However, the lack of interesting villains was a detriment to an otherwise decent series. Lightspeed is not bad, but there are much better seasons. Like next time, where we witness the timeless wonder that is Time Force.
Yeah, baby! Ooh, I can't wait! I can't wait! Let's go!
But I'm sure you're well aware that at that close distance, you'll blow up yourself, too!
Come on, Red. Pull the trigger.
Well said. Well said. So, there we go. History of Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. I do agree with what Lewis said, where the weakest aspect of this season was the villains. Especially when you compare them to the villains that we've had in the previous 2 seasons. Characters like Astronema and Ecliptor, and then Trina and Villamax. To go from those to this definitely does feel like a downgrade. But thankfully we will get better villains next season. I can guarantee that. Also, I mentioned in part 2 of reacting to History Power Rangers Lost Galaxy that I listened to a podcast called The Grid, a queer Power Rangers podcast, which is a great show that you should listen to. And they did an episode which is like a whole retrospective on Lightspeed Rescue, and they've speculated a lot in that podcast about whether or not Kelsey, the Yellow Ranger of the season, is a lesbian. And look, I'm not one to like add to that sort of thing, obviously. I'm a straight guy, so I shouldn't really even make those kinds of assumptions myself. But like, especially when you look at it now through like the lens of a more modern perspective, yeah, I mean, there is definitely evidence that could support that theory. Now, obviously, they couldn't say that sort of thing back then. Again, I'm not gonna try to like add to that personally, because again, I'm a straight guy. That's not my that's not in my station. So, by the way, because I knew that it was going to be a while before I got to finish this bit, or finish part 2, I actually recorded ahead of time my little epilogue for this, similar to what I did with Lost Galaxy, where I talk about which actors like went on to do notable stuff afterwards. So let me just play that for you right now. When it comes to cast members that would go on to be in other notable projects, the only one that stood out for me was Keith Robinson, who played Joel, the Green Ranger of the season. A few years after this, he would go on to be in the 2006 movie version of Dreamgirls. And it's funny because I was watching Dreamgirls for the first time a few years ago, and then he pops up on screen, and I was like, wait a minute, that dude looks familiar. Holy shit, that's Joel! Like, I was not expecting him to be in that movie at all, and he was really good. He was really good in that movie. And keep in mind, this is a movie that starred people like Beyonce and Eddie Murphy and Jamie Foxx and Jennifer Hudson, so the fact that he stood out in this was really nice to see. Also, at one point, he was wearing a green shirt, and I was like, very interesting choice of shirt color there. Coincidence? Probably. Also, a couple months ago, I was doing a full series rewatch of Monk, and he shows up in an episode of Monk, I think somewhere in the final season. Yeah, I think it was called Monk and the Critic. He shows up as a police officer. And coincidentally enough, there's another Power Rangers alumni that also appears in that same episode of Monk. The thing is, she shows up a few minutes earlier than him, and the irony is that she's from the season after Keith Robinson's. But more on that when we get there. Also, apparently, Amy Adams came very close to playing Dana, the Pink Ranger of the season. She auditioned for the role and was allegedly very close to landing the part until her agent talked her out of it, saying that if she did play a Power Ranger, she wouldn't have much of a career afterwards. So it makes you wonder, if she did play the Pink Ranger, would she still end up becoming an A-list Oscar-winning actress afterwards? I mean, stranger things have happened. She was in that J.D. Vance movie, so who knows? And lastly, I found this picture online of Jamie Lee Curtis dressed as the Pink Ranger at a Halloween party the same year that the season came out. There's no story behind it. It's just, Jamie Lee Curtis as a Power Ranger, so you're welcome, I guess. Anyway, I think I've prattled on long enough. Let's wrap this up. Those are my reactions to History of Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. What do you think of Lightspeed Rescue? Is it your favorite season, least favorite season? Do you have a favorite Ranger, favorite episode? Tell me in the comments down below. And as always, if you like what you saw here, then feel free to click that thumbs up button, as it helps me quite a bit. Share this with your friends, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. And click the notification bell, that way you'll never miss a video from yours truly. That's going to be my new sign-off thing now, isn't it? Ah, well. Anyway, come back next time for when I begin reacting to History of Power Rangers Cosmic Fury. I'm kind of going back and forth about whether I want to, film part 1 for that tonight, like the same time as this. Short answer, no, I didn't. But also I want to let you guys know ahead of time that my next video won't actually be this. Instead, it'll be something a little more off the cuff because Wednesday will mark 15 years since my very first YouTube video. That's right, yours truly has been making videos for 15 years now. And if you really want to feel old, this year marks 25 years since Lightspeed Rescue. So yeah, we're all old and death is imminent. Isn't that great? Look forward to that next, and then afterwards will be part 1 of my reactions to History of Power Rangers Cosmic Fury. I promise, that will come afterwards. Anyway, till next time, I'm Marc Aquino. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Marc Aquino YouTube channel.